One introduction. Have you ever noticed how men often express love in ways that might not be so obvious at first? Maybe it's in the small acts of service, the quiet moments of support, or the way they protect the people they care about. But sometimes it feels like there's a deeper, more hidden layer to how they show their emotions, doesn't it? Well, in today's video, we're going to peel back the layers and take a look at how men show love according to the famous psychologist Carl Jung. You might be surprised to learn that their emotional expressions often go beyond just saying, "I love you." Instead, it's through actions, archetypes, and even hidden parts of their personality that love can shine through. We'll explore how Jung's ideas on the shadow self and archetypes help explain why men often struggle to express love verbally and how they show their affection in more subtle, unconscious ways. So if you've ever wondered about the deeper psychological forces shaping the way men love, or you just want to understand the hidden meanings behind their actions, this video is for you. By the end of this, you'll have a whole new perspective on how men express their feelings. So stick around, because you won't want to miss these insights. 2. Jung's archetypes and the masculine psyche. When we talk about love, most of us might think about romantic gestures, grand declarations, or even physical touch. But according to Carl Jung, love is much more complex than that. It's tied to the very fabric of our psyche, shaped by unconscious forces that go far beyond surface-level behaviors. One of the key ideas Jung introduced to help explain this complexity is the concept of archetypes, universal patterns that shape the way we think, feel, and act. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are deeply ingrained, timeless patterns in our collective unconscious. These patterns exist in everyone, men and women alike. But for men, they tend to play out in very distinct ways. Think of archetypes as the roles or characters we all play in the story of our lives, and each one carries a different way of expressing love. For men, some of the most prominent archetypes include the hero, the king, the warrior, and the lover. These aren't just random labels. Jung believed that these archetypes shape how men express their emotions, including their love. Let's break down how these archetypes influence love and relationships. The hero, often driven by a desire to protect and provide, the hero archetype is about strength, courage, and overcoming obstacles. A man embodying this archetype might show love by taking care of the people he cares about, whether that's through physical acts of protection or by working hard to provide for their well-being. While this may seem like tough love on the surface, it's an expression of deep care that goes unnoticed if you're only looking for more obvious signs. The king. The king represents authority, leadership, and a sense of responsibility. A man in touch with this archetype might show love through guidance, wisdom, and support. Think of the way a father figure often offers unconditional love through advice, mentorship, and leadership. He may not always say, "I love you" directly, but through his actions and steady presence, he communicates devotion and loyalty in profound ways. The warrior. The warrior archetype is about action, discipline, and fighting for what he believes in. When it comes to love, a man embodying this archetype may not be the most overtly emotional, but his love is shown through commitment and protecting those he loves. This could be seen in small, everyday actions like defending his partner in times of need or standing firm against challenges, even if he doesn't always express his feelings through words. The lover. Finally, we have the lover. This archetype is about emotional connection, intimacy, and passion. While men may express love in different ways through the other archetypes, the lover archetype is where emotions, affection, and physical connection come to the forefront. A man who identifies with this archetype might express his love more openly through moments of tenderness or acts of emotional vulnerability. So what does all this mean for how men express love? Well, the key takeaway is this: each of these archetypes provides a different lens through which love can be shown. For men, love often comes through action, protection, responsibility, and deep emotional connection, rather than just verbal expressions. These archetypes, deeply embedded in their unconscious, guide their behavior in relationships without them even realizing it. By understanding these archetypes, we get a clearer picture of why men may show love in ways that are sometimes hard to recognize because, as you can see, it's not always about saying the words, "I love you." Sometimes love is expressed through the heroism of a quiet sacrifice, the wisdom of steady support, the strength of protection, or the warmth of passionate connection. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into the role of the shadow self in the masculine psyche and how it affects men's emotional expressions. But before we move on, take a moment to reflect on which archetype you see most in the men around you. Could it be the hero in your partner, the king in your father, or maybe even the warrior in your closest friend? This awareness might just change the way you see love in action. Stay tuned. 3. The shadow self. Love through unconscious act. Now let's dive into something a little more mysterious. Something that influences how men express love, but often goes unnoticed by both the person showing it and the one receiving it. I'm talking about Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self. You may have heard the term shadow before, but what exactly does it mean? The shadow is essentially the part of ourselves that we hide, ignore, or suppress, because it doesn't align with our ideal self-image. For example, if a man sees himself as strong, stoic, and independent, the shadow could be the softer, more vulnerable parts of himself that he doesn't want to show. Jung believed that our shadow selves aren't inherently bad or negative. In fact, they hold a lot of important emotional truths, especially when it comes to how we love. When it comes to love, a man's shadow self can often reveal deep unconscious ways he expresses affection. The shadow doesn't operate on the surface level of conscious thought. Instead, it manifests in small, sometimes subtle actions hidden beneath the surface. This might be why at times men have trouble verbally expressing their feelings or showing affection in ways that are traditionally expected. The love they feel is still there. It's just buried in their unconscious and expressed in indirect, sometimes unexpected ways. Let's explore this a little deeper. Imagine a man who's been taught to suppress emotions like sadness or vulnerability. He may not openly express affection or say "I love you" very often, but the shadow could show up in his actions. Perhaps he goes out of his way to fix something for his partner, even though she never asked. Maybe he stays up late working to make sure she's taken care of financially or emotionally, but he doesn't always say why. It's his unconscious love language at work. The key here is that the shadow expresses love in ways that often feel hidden or misunderstood. For instance, a man might show his love by working hard, taking care of his partner's needs, or even making sacrifices that go unrecognized. It's not that he doesn't care. It's that his love is expressed through action, driven by deeper unconscious motivations he might not fully understand. Another example of the shadow at play might be a man who's struggled with past emotional wounds. He may have trouble fully opening up about his emotions, but over time his actions, like being protective or offering guidance in tough times, speak volumes. The shadow self has a way of revealing itself in these quieter, sometimes unexpected acts, especially when the man feels emotionally vulnerable or unsure of how to express affection. So why does this matter when understanding how men show love? The shadow self is all about those hidden, more complex parts of the psyche that shape behaviors and emotions in ways we don't always recognize. For men, love can be wrapped up in the unconscious expressions of this shadow, showing affection without ever saying the words. If you're able to recognize these subtle signs, you might start to see love in action even when it's not being verbalized. To really understand how a man's love operates through the shadow, you have to pay attention to the unspoken acts, the quiet gestures, the little sacrifices, the ways he shows up for you without needing recognition or praise. It's all a form of love, just filtered through the unconscious lens of the shadow. In the next section, we'll explore how these hidden emotional expressions tie into the deeper masculine psyche as we continue uncovering the rich complexity of men's love and the psychological forces that shape it. So, stay tuned, because the story of how men love is far more layered than we might first realize. 4. Indirect expressions of love. Acts, not words. Have you ever noticed how some men show love not by speaking the words, "I love you," but through their actions? It's as if love flows out of them in quiet, sometimes unnoticed ways. It's subtle, but it's there, clear as day, yet easily overlooked, if you're expecting it to be declared outright. This brings us to one of the most important points in understanding how men express love. Indirect expressions of love through actions, not words. While many of us are accustomed to the idea that love is best shown through verbal affirmation or grand gestures, men often communicate their feelings in quieter, more understated ways. And no, that doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they're operating on a different wavelength when it comes to emotional expression. Think of it like this: when a man loves, he might not immediately say, "I love you," but he'll show it in the little things he does. Maybe he takes care of household tasks without being asked, offers to run errands on a busy day, or stays up late to help you with a project. These actions might not seem like much in the moment, but they speak volumes. For men, love often comes down to action. They might feel more comfortable showing their love by doing things, whether that's fixing something around the house, working hard to support his family, or protecting those he loves in times of need. It's a way of communicating care and affection that doesn't rely on verbal expression, but rather on making the other person's life easier, safer, or more joyful. For example, let's say a man spends his Saturday fixing up the car of someone he cares about. It's not the kind of thing that comes with a grand speech, yet it's a clear sign of love. The act itself, putting in time and effort for the benefit of someone else, sends a message that words alone can't capture. This is where the true power of indirect expressions of love comes into play. They show a deep level of commitment, care, and affection without needing constant verbal reminders. Another common example might be when a man is going through a tough time but still puts the needs of his partner first. He may not openly discuss his own emotions, but he'll make sure his partner feels loved and supported through his actions. It's like when a man is quietly patient when his partner is upset, or offers a comforting touch without saying a word. These acts speak more loudly than words could ever convey. But why does this happen? Why do men tend to express their love in such practical, action-driven ways instead of using words? According to Jungian psychology, this could be tied to the archetypal roles men embody. For instance, the warrior archetype, which is about action, strength, and perseverance, might be driving the way men show affection rather than articulating their emotions. The warrior expresses love through doing, taking charge of situations, defending loved ones, and ensuring safety. Similarly, the king archetype, which embodies responsibility and protection, might lead a man to show his love by taking care of his loved ones in practical ways. The actions may not be overtly emotional, but they carry a deep and quiet love that's often underappreciated. These indirect expressions of love often go unnoticed, especially in a culture that puts so much emphasis on verbal affirmation and public declarations. But recognizing these acts for what they truly are, acts of love, helps you understand that the absence of words doesn't mean the absence of feelings. So the next time you see a man doing something small but thoughtful for you, remember, it's not about the words he's not saying. It's about the love he's expressing in a way that feels natural to him through his actions. In our next section, we'll explore how unconscious emotional signals play a huge role in men's expressions of love and why they often don't voice their feelings directly. But for now, think about how these acts of love might show up in your own life. Have you noticed a man in your life showing his love quietly? Perhaps the message has been right in front of you the whole time. Stick around, because we're just scratching the surface of how men's emotions really work. 5. The role of vulnerability. Why men struggle to express love verbally. Now let's talk about something that often gets in the way of men expressing love. Vulnerability. You've probably heard the phrase, vulnerability is strength. But for many men, showing vulnerability, especially when it comes to love, can feel like the exact opposite. It can feel like a weakness, a loss of control, or a breach of the emotional fortress they've spent years building around themselves. But here's the thing, the struggle to express love verbally is often rooted in fear of being too exposed, fear of rejection, and fear of not being seen as strong enough. For men, vulnerability often feels like stepping into the unknown. When it comes to love, expressing emotions verbally can feel like taking a huge emotional risk. Now, this doesn't mean that men don't feel love deeply. It just means that expressing it verbally might not always be their first choice. For men, saying, "I love you," or laying bare their heart might feel too open, too raw. There's a certain level of discomfort that comes with the vulnerability of opening up emotionally. Especially in a world where masculinity is often associated with strength and stoicism. Society tends to paint the picture that men should be the rock, unmovable, unshakable. This expectation can make expressing softer emotions like love feel almost unnatural or even dangerous. But let's dig deeper. Why does this vulnerability feel so difficult for men? One reason lies in cultural conditioning. From an early age, boys are taught to suppress their emotions, to tough it out, and be strong. As they grow up, this conditioning sticks with them, shaping how they view emotional expression. They might internalize the idea that showing too much emotion makes them seem weak or insecure. That's where vulnerability starts to feel like a threat to their identity. Jungian psychology gives us another perspective. According to Carl Jung, the anima, the feminine side of a man's psyche, plays a key role in emotional expression. However, for many men, connecting with this inner, more vulnerable side is challenging. The anima represents the deeper, more emotional part of themselves that's often repressed or neglected. This inner feminine energy, which is naturally attuned to emotional depth and love, can be a source of great strength. But in a world that values the tough guy persona, tapping into this emotional side can be intimidating. Imagine this: a man might feel a deep sense of love for his partner, but struggles to put those feelings into words. He may feel that expressing those emotions out loud will expose him to judgment, or worse, to rejection. Instead of saying, "I love you," he might show his love through action, working late to provide, making small sacrifices, or creating a safe environment without saying much at all. These actions are a way of protecting his vulnerability, even as they express love in subtle, indirect ways. However, the problem arises when these unspoken acts are misinterpreted. If his partner is expecting words or overt emotional expressions, the silence might create frustration, confusion, or a sense that the love isn't there. But in reality, the love is there, just wrapped up in layers of vulnerability that are difficult for him to uncover or voice. Here's an example. Imagine a man who is deeply in love but doesn't openly express his emotions. He might seem distant at times, even though his actions speak louder than words. Maybe he plans a surprise weekend getaway, pays attention to little details, and makes sure everything is perfect. Yet when asked how he feels, he might hesitate or change the subject. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that he is uncomfortable laying bare his emotions. For him, love is felt deeply, but the vulnerability of expressing it verbally feels like exposing himself to an emotional risk. The key takeaway here is that vulnerability is the bridge to emotional intimacy. But for many men, it's a bridge they are hesitant to cross. The inability to express love verbally isn't about a lack of affection. It's about the fear of being emotionally exposed. This is something that doesn't come easily for many men, especially if they've been conditioned to view emotional openness as a weakness. In the next section, we'll explore how these challenges with vulnerability can be overcome and how men can begin to express love in more balanced, open ways. But before we do, take a moment to think about how you might be interpreting a man's love in your life. Could it be that what seems like emotional distance is actually an expression of love that's waiting to be understood? Stick with me because we're about to explore how these complex layers of emotional expression come together in a powerful way. 6. Conclusion. So now that we've explored the deeper layers of how men express love, let's take a moment to reflect. Men might not always express their feelings in the way we expect, but that doesn't mean they're not deeply capable of love. Their expressions of affection may be quieter, more indirect, or even masked by acts of service or protection, but they are no less meaningful. The truth is, understanding and appreciating men's unique expressions of love requires a shift in perspective. Instead of measuring love solely by words or grand declarations, we need to start recognizing the subtle, quieter expressions that often speak louder than anything else. It's in the little things, a hand placed gently on your shoulder, the effort put into making sure you're comfortable, or the small sacrifices made without asking for recognition. These are just as powerful and meaningful as a heartfelt "I love you." It's also important to remember that vulnerability plays a huge role in how men express their emotions. In our culture, vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, especially for men. But as we've seen, vulnerability is actually a crucial component of love. Men may not always have the words to express their deepest feelings, but they show their love in ways that feel safer to them through actions, protection, and even the quiet sacrifices they make. And here's the thing. Just because a man struggles to express his love verbally doesn't mean he doesn't care. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's in these quieter, more indirect ways that you can see the depth of his affection. By embracing these forms of love, we can better understand and support the men in our lives as they navigate their own emotional landscapes. In the end, love isn't about fitting into a mold or adhering to certain expectations. It's about embracing the unique ways people express their feelings. And for many men, that means understanding love through action, vulnerability, and deeper layers of connection that may not always be visible on the surface. So next time you feel like a man isn't showing you love, ask yourself, is he expressing it in a different way? Maybe his love is more in his actions than in his words. Maybe his vulnerability is tucked into the way he listens to you, protects you, or simply shows up in your life every day. By learning to recognize these expressions, you'll find that love is everywhere. It just might look a little different than you expect. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive into Jungian psychology and the way men express love. Understanding these nuances can help us connect with one another on a more meaningful level. Breaking through the surface and tapping into the deeper, often unspoken truths of how we care for one another. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear how you interpret love in your relationships. See you next time.